Hi guys, so excuse filming still from the play garage, and there's construction going on down the road, so you'd have to excuse the hammering and banging and sawing and probably some shouting at some stage. They normally start shouting around at this time. So yeah, serious note. So when we talk about rehabilitation programs and exercises, obviously I talk mainly from the perspective of lower back issues because that's predominantly what I deal with, but it applies to pretty much any injury you can think of. So not just lower back, it could be neck, shoulders, elbow, hand, wrist, hips, knees, foot, whatever it could be. We've always got three outcomes. So, regardless of what people want to say to try and muddy the waters, and those three outcomes are, if you do the right things at the right time in the right way, you're going to get an almost immediate benefit and effect. The other outcome is that it's kind of, you're doing stuff, you're doing the work, but it's not really giving you the benefit it should do. So it's not hurting, but it's not helping. So usually you're missing one of those factors. It could be slightly the wrong stuff to do, slightly incorrect technique, or it could just be the wrong time to do some of those exercises. But it's not really hurting you, but at best case, you're wasting your time because you're not getting anywhere. And then worst case, which is what we have zero tolerance for, is that, the exercise program, and I've seen it before with people with back issues, they have an exercise program that makes the situation worse. So that's the wrong stuff, plus a combination of wrong technique, plus a combination of, at the wrong time, for whatever it is that people are trying to do. But predominantly it's more just doing completely the wrong stuff, which is what I want to focus on in this video. So those are the three outcomes. It works, you kind of wasted time, doesn't really get anywhere, or you're just making things worse, hands down. I think with back issues is that the nature of the back, because it's always doing something, either it's holding you up or holding you together. If it's annoyed, it's going to tell you immediately. If it's starting to calm down, you're going to notice very quickly, if not immediately. So again, within a couple of days is my yardstick. So everyone trains with me, I say our yardstick is an improvement within a couple of days. Not that it's 100%, but it's a noticeable improvement. And then from there, it's week on week, measurable, steady progression. That's what we're looking for. That's our yardstick for progression. That means we're in that first column, doing the right things in the right way at the right time. So where does this sort of stuff fall down? Well, again, by the time generally people come and see me, they've probably seen 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other people before they've seen me, and they may have had their back issues for 10 plus years. One person was 30 years, and I think there's still a habit out there, I think, of people, not just clinicians, but also trainers and physios, people like that. They just can be very lazy with back issues, and someone comes in with back pain or presents with back pain, and they just shotgun the same 3, 4, or 5 exercises at every single person that walks in the door. And really, if you want success, you haven't got the luxury of just trying random shit and hoping it's gonna, give you a good result. So rather than just shotgunning random nonsense and seeing what sticks, we've got to take a bit more methodical approach. And where it always fails down, or where they've gone wrong, is because they've rushed straight into, let's give you some exercises, let's get going, let's give you a bit of treatment. And you've already skipped a couple of steps to get there. What you should start with is a thorough investigation as to why you've got back pain, because there will be very specific reasons why. And we call those, I tend to call those reasons pain triggers, or injury mechanics, but they're very specific movements and postures that you're doing day to day that are creating that problem. And if you skip that stage and go straight to the exercise program, best case scenario, you're going to fall into column 2, which is wasting your time trying random stuff that isn't really fixing the issue. But it's entirely possible, and I've seen it more often than not, is people get into the third column where their exercise and rehabilitation program is actually making the problem worse. So what would be a good example of that, or a simple example? So a good one is glute bridges, which I'll put up a video somewhere of a basic glute bridge technique. So it looks like a very simple exercise. At the end of the day, you're on your back and then you just push your bum up to the ceiling, right? It's not that hard, right? Well, you'd be surprised for a simple movement. And I always say, if you show me someone with back issues, I'll show you someone with defective hips. And I guarantee you they've got, very little, if any, control over their glutes. So when you give them something simple like a glute bridge, usually one of 2 things is probably going to happen. One, which is a bit more obvious, which some people who've come from potentially yoga and Pilates classes, they get taught to sort of like, imagine if this is your lower back on the floor, you have like a natural arch, like a natural gap off the floor. To squeeze their glutes, they're going to flatten their back into the floor and then peel their spine off to come up. So the theory behind that is it makes it easier to squeeze your glutes, which it probably does make it a little bit easier. But if we understand the injury mechanic of someone who's got a bulge or a herniation or is just plain flexion intolerant, and you're teaching them to go into flexion every single time they do a glute bridge, that's going to hamper progress and it's going to sensitize the back to pain. So if you think about that bank balance, if you're flexion intolerant, every time you go into flexion, you make a little withdrawal on that bank account. Again, when you get to zero overdrawn, that's when you have a flare up. So there's plenty of times day to day where that's going to happen. You don't have much control over it. So we need to, spare our bank balance as much as possible for those moments. What we don't want to do is deliberately deplete that bank balance by doing a simple exercise in a very bad way, which is putting you into your injury mechanic. It's complete, at best it's wasting your time, but more than likely it's going to, sensitize you back to pain, even though in your mind you think you're doing the right things. So again, we have to start with understanding the injury mechanics and the pain triggers. We can't just skip straight to doing exercises, because it's basically like Russian roulette, and I can always guarantee you that you'll do something with the best intentions and you can make your back pain far worse. And there's nothing more frustrating than you putting time and effort into addressing a problem, when in actual fact you're actually making your problem worse. So understand that injury mechanic. Particularly if you're flexion intolerant, peeling the spine off the floor is not a good idea. The other thing is that you may not be doing that, but something that people do that is probably a little bit less obvious to tell straight away is if they've got poor control over their glutes. And again, this is more of a, if you're giving someone a glute bridge too soon, or you're trying to do glute bridges too soon, you're missing some of the other components before you get there. They might be using their hamstrings or the lower back, particularly the hamstrings is quite a common one. So a lot of times you see people doing big weighted hip thrusts, super fast and super quick. You try and give that to someone who's got back issues and poor glute control, they're just going to use their hamstrings. And again, they're probably overusing their hamstrings because the glutes are asleep anyway. So again, you're making the underlying problem far worse by, with the best intentions, trying to do the right sort of exercise. So for those people, because it's the right exercise but at the wrong time, you might need to look at, let's start with a basic clamshell and prone hip extensions first of all, to give us the components we need to be able to do a glute bridge. Because a glute bridge isn't a starting exercise for most people. That's like a stage 2, stage 3 bit of a progression, because it's a slightly bigger movement that needs a bit more control. So again, you might need to roll back and work on the components. So there, with one similar exercise, we've looked at two scenarios. One is you're just doing it completely wrong, which is going to exacerbate injury mechanics. And two is if you're trying to do it the right way, but because it's the wrong time for you to do that exercise because you're missing components, again, you get a negative result. So, in summary, rather than just skipping towards exercises straight off the bat and hoping for the best, spend some time to understand your injury mechanics, understand, where things are going wrong, what your weaknesses are that you need to work on, and then you can begin to build an exercise program from there. And if you skip that stage, you are playing Russian roulette, and more often than not, it's going to end badly. Best case scenario, just waste years of your life and not actually getting anywhere with your back issue. So think about what you're doing, understand your injury mechanics, understand what's actually going on, and then look to put together an exercise or rehab program and sort of build from there. And again, still as you go forward, continually reassess as you go, because sometimes you might need to change things as you go, but at least if you've got a sound base to start from, you're more likely to fall into column 1, where you're doing the right things at the right time, in the right way, and giving yourself the best results for your efforts.